the tenants and get votes. That's basically what it is, isn't it? Hello and welcome to Mark My Words. I'm going to do a news roundup today. I've got an article here. This is relating to rent rises, which are surely due to continue. This is an article written by the economics correspondent at The Guardian. The Guardian is not my favourite newspaper. I remember at university there were a few of the lecturers that used to walk around reading it with their sort of big sandals and woolly jumpers. And they weren't in the economics department. They're saying that rent rises in Britain are forecast to outpace wage growth, despite having already surged at the fastest pace on record after the COVID pandemic and the cost of living crisis. The Resolution Foundation expects that added pressure on millions of households in that average rents could rise 13% over the next 3 years, maybe about 3 or 4% compounded per annum. You know, wage growth was 7% over the last year. Wage growth isn't suddenly going to go back to 2 or 3%. So this might actually be in line with wage growth. Downstairs, we manage about 1,300 tenancies. We've certainly noticed in the last month, there's been slightly less tenant demand. Stuff's still getting rented, but it's come down from those sort of frenetic levels that we've been seeing over the last couple of years. Clearly, there's still a big shortage. The government have still got it in to some extent for landlords. They introduced some more stuff in the budget. I know it was more around Airbnb and serviced accommodation. You know, you can't have it in for landlords, increase taxation, Section 24, stamp duty, remove multiple dwellings relief as they did in the last budget, and generally give landlords the idea that they are hated and unloved, and then suddenly expect there to be a big supply of rental properties coming on the market, which then moderates and controls rents. So I think this is certainly a trend in the medium term. There will be less landlords, and I think rent rises are set to continue. I can't say I'm wholly upset about that as a landlord, but you know, it is basic economics, guys. If you reduce the supply of something with the demand being equal, the price, i.e. the rent, will rise. Watch some of Margaret Thatcher's speeches and she'll explain how you create incentive, i.e. like she did with the Housing Act of the late 80s, introduction of the AST, which it now looks like they want to remove with the banning of the so-called no-fault evictions. Landlords in reality don't generally like evicting for any other reason than rent arrears. I would say over 95% of the time it's because of rent arrears, but they use a Section 21 because it's actually a lot more certain than the Section 8. But yeah, create incentive and then you will control rents. An example of this is the crazy policies that the Scottish government introduced with rent control. Rents in Scotland have gone absolutely nuts. The average flat in Edinburgh, there were quite a few reports a few months ago of in excess of 150 inquiries because they are pushing so many landlords out of the sector. As soon as a tenant goes, you can imagine the rent goes absolutely nuts. And I think the rent control was sort of for a certain period. So it doesn't work. The policies need to be incentivising landlords to come into the market to create more choice to moderate rents. But that's not politically popular, is it? And doesn't get votes. So why would they do that? Next story is, again, a Guardian story. You can tell I didn't pull these out. I did actually read this over the weekend anyway. So it's about Britain's staycation boom. As bookings dry up, the cost of living, cold weather and surplus of holiday lets have hit rental property owners. I think a lot of this is during the pandemic, you know, there were people going on these staycations, they were staying away for long periods of time. I think that and general attacks on landlords has created much more supply of Airbnb properties, and I think that's starting to catch up. I think there is a very, very strong supply, and therefore, you know, in some areas there might be a surplus now. So the nightly rate which is being charged is dropping. It's almost the inverse of what's happening with long-term 6-month AST rental properties. But the government has now removed the capital allowances. They're saying that serviced accommodation or Airbnb properties are going to be subject to Section 24. So I suspect they'll reduce the supply. Some of these will come back into the general rental market. Yeah, I think that the market will start to calm down and level out. Next article, again from The Guardian, is in relation to insurance commissions on flats. I think when leaseholders are paying their ground rent and service charge and insurance, lots of them are being topped up. There are commissions going from the broker stroke insurance company to the freeholder. Yes, I think that happens. I think it's commonplace. I think they're allowed to do it. I can understand why lots of people are getting upset about this. Michael Gove says he's going to make it illegal or make it so that it's disclosable, or that it has to be disclosed to the leaseholders. But yeah, I think it's been going on for many, many years, and I think it will continue to do so until the government legislates. So these are two quite interesting articles, both from Zoopla actually. Stop looking at articles from The Guardian. They can go away now, and you can see here they are almost completely contradictory. This is the same day, so these were both written on released on the 28th of March, and one says, are UK house prices falling in March 2024? And the other article says, no further house price falls expected this year. So which is true? Well, of course, the reality is probably somewhere in between. Okay, they're written by separate people. Ellie Isaac, who is the senior editor, but of course, Nick Hopkirk is also the senior editor. So they've clearly got two senior editors at Zoopla. The article about UK house prices falling goes into the areas that actually have been rising over the last year. Belfast, Glasgow, Sheffield, all those sort of outer areas that probably didn't go up as much during COVID. You know, Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool, all of those have been rising. And the biggest faller, it says, was Southampton, probably shot up in the pandemic. Same with Portsmouth. 2020 was probably coming to the end of the previous cycle when it went absolutely nuts with COVID. And we probably started the new cycle in 2022. But if you look back to 2020, the areas that went up the most earliest will have probably been further towards London. It says here, you know, Cambridge, South Coast. There'll have been areas where there will have been more properties which are spread out, probably because people were living in bigger properties in the country because they wanted to get away from towns and cities during COVID so they didn't catch the virus. And of course they wanted somewhere to work because they didn't need to go to work every day. I think all of that is reversing now. And I think also Scotland and Northern Ireland, they're just at the end of the train. So when you get a new cycle, if you think of a roller coaster and you think of the first car on the roller coaster being, say, Mayfair or Kensington, or, you know, nicer areas in the southeast inside the M25, and maybe slightly outside like Cambridge or Milton Keynes, those areas are the ones that go up first in the new sort of cycle. They're the areas that when interest rates drop, they're probably react the quickest. What happens is, as you go up, they're at the front of the cycle. They're the first car. But the last car here might be Northern Ireland, the place where, as the ripple goes out from these areas, it's furthest away. So it's the last car on the roller coaster. And then when you get to the top of the cycle, i.e. interest rates go up to 5.25%, or base rate goes up to 5.25, as happened in the last couple of years, then house prices at the front of the roller coaster start to go over the top. And then Peterborough, that's probably here, maybe still rising because it hasn't quite caught up to the top of the cycle. And as we carry on, Belfast is still going up. And let's say Partick in Glasgow, that's still going up at the back of the roller coaster. As the roller coaster comes down the hill in Mayfair, the back of the roller coaster is still going up. And that's pretty much how this whole sort of house price increase or fall works in terms of where it starts and how it ripples out over time. That has been Mark Homer for Mark My Words.